The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a sun-drenched penthouse that smelled faintly of espresso and old memories. Emily stepped inside, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Her heart raced, but her face remained unreadable. Beside her, a small boy with sandy hair clutched her hand, wide-eyed and silent. Nathaniel Whitmore looked up from behind a sleek glass desk. His once youthful face had grown harder, more tired. He blinked, as if unsure whether what he was seeing was real. "Emily?" he asked, his voice a whisper. She nodded slowly. "Hi, Nate." His eyes dropped to the child. "Who is he?" Emily inhaled sharply. "This is Jacob." Nathaniel's lips parted, but no sound came. His gaze locked onto the boy, who tilted his head, mirroring the man's expression without even knowing it. Emily's voice broke the silence. "He's your son." The words hit like a blow. Papers slid from Nathaniel's hands. His breath caught. But before he could speak, Emily stepped forward. "But that's not the only reason I'm here," she said, her voice calm, heavy with something unspoken. "There's more you need to know, and it starts way before Jacob was ever born. Before we dive deeper, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell. Here, we tell stories you won't find anywhere else, raw, real, and unforgettable. Don't miss what's coming next. Join thousands who believe every choice has a story, and every story deserves to be heard. Emily Carter had learned how to disappear in plain sight. In the crowded streets of Baltimore, she blended into the noise, the movement, the daily grind of people just trying to survive. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment with her grandmother, Maggie, who raised her after Emily's mother vanished one night and never came back. Her father had been just a name on a birth certificate. Nothing more. At 26, Emily worked double shifts as a caregiver in a local nursing home. She was kind, attentive, and exhausted. Every night she walked home with aching feet and a plastic bag of groceries she could barely afford. Her dreams, once bright and bold, had been reduced to whispers she didn't dare speak aloud anymore. What she wanted was simple, a chance to study psychology, to help people like her grandmother who had fought depression most of her life. But dreams cost time, and time was a luxury she didn't have. Still, she smiled. For Maggie, always for Maggie. The older woman's laugh, her warm hands, her nightly stories from a life half-lived, they were Emily's only treasure. One rainy afternoon, while folding laundry in the common room of the care home, she was approached by a man in a sharp grey suit. He spoke with precision, like someone used to being obeyed. "Are you Emily Carter?" he asked. She nodded, unsure. "I represent Mr. Nathaniel Whitmore. He has a proposition for you. A contract, high compensation, no physical requirements. Just presence, discretion, and your signature." Emily laughed at first, thought it was a scam, but he handed her a card, thick, embossed, expensive. Everything she wasn't. Later that night, she sat at the edge of Maggie's bed, the card in her hand, the possibilities swirling in her mind. $10,000 a month, enough to pay off Maggie's medications, enough to maybe go back to school. "I know what you're thinking," Maggie said, sensing the storm behind Emily's silence. "Sometimes the hardest decisions come wrapped in what looks like salvation." Emily didn't sleep that night. By morning she had made a choice. She would meet Mr. Whitmore, not because she wanted to, but because for once she needed life to give her something more than just survival. The first time Emily saw Nathaniel Whitmore in person, she felt like she was stepping into another dimension. His penthouse overlooked the harbor, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city like it was his to command. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets, posture rigid, like a man who had everything yet trusted no one. "Emily," he said, turning to face her. His voice was smooth, measured. "Thank you for coming." She nodded, unsure whether to smile or not. The agreement was laid out with clinical precision. Appear at events. Pretend affection. No intimacy expected. No questions allowed. In return, a private car, a monthly allowance, and a place to live. A new wardrobe was already waiting in a guest bedroom. Emily signed the contract with trembling fingers. At first it was surreal. Designer dresses replaced her thrift store clothes. Dinners at charity galas replaced her quiet nights folding laundry. Nathaniel coached her on posture, speech, and even what to laugh at. Every detail was curated, every moment felt rehearsed, but Emily played the part well. She smiled when needed, nodded in the right places, and made Nathaniel look less like a reclusive billionaire and more like a man in love. She saw the way investors' eyes softened when they looked at them together. She was his illusion of warmth. Still, she hoped, quietly, naively, that somewhere beneath his guarded eyes, there was a man who might one day see her as more than an arrangement. One evening as they left a black-tie gala, Emily turned to him in the car. "You were different tonight," she said gently. Lighter. He didn't look at her, just kept his eyes on the road ahead. "I'm good at pretending," he said simply. She looked out the window, heart tightening, but she couldn't deny the small moments. The way his hand lingered on her back, the way his voice softened when she laughed. They weren't part of the contract. Then, one morning, she woke to find a note on the kitchen counter. "Board meeting. You'll be mentioned in today's investor call. Play the part." It wasn't signed, not even a thank you, just a reminder. Emily stared at it for a long time. The money paid the bills. Her grandmother's health was improving. She'd even applied for online classes, something she never thought possible. On the surface, life was better than ever, but beneath it all, she was starting to feel like she was losing herself in someone else's script, and she wasn't sure how long she could keep playing along. 3 months into the contract, Emily knew every corner of Nathaniel's world, but he still knew almost nothing about hers. She had memorized his favorite wine, the schedule of his board meetings, the way he adjusted his cufflinks when he was anxious. But Nathaniel never asked her how she was doing, never asked about Maggie, never asked anything beyond what the contract required. Still, there were flickers of something real, a quiet look across a crowded room, a shared laugh in the back of the limo. One night, he even asked if she liked piano music and played a soft piece on the grand piano while she listened from the hallway. Those moments became her hope. She started dressing with more care, not for the events, but for him. Her smile stopped being forced. She began to imagine a future that wasn't just transactional. Maybe, just maybe, this could evolve into something more. But then came the fundraiser. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and champagne. Nathaniel stood beside her in a tailored navy suit, charming donors and CEOs. Emily felt proud to be by his side. Until she heard her name. She had wandered near the bar, searching for a moment to breathe, when 2 men, executives from Nathaniel's company, walked by laughing. "She's pretty, I'll give him that," one said, "but 10 grand a month for arm candy. Whitmore's really slipping." Emily froze. The other replied, "You kidding? It's genius. She humanizes him, makes him look less like a robot. Everyone wins." Their laughter faded into the crowd, but the words clung to her like smoke. She walked back to the table slowly, trying to steady her breathing. Nathaniel looked up, oblivious. "You okay?" Emily nodded. "Just needed some air." That night, she lay awake in the guest room. The lights from the city bled through the curtains, dancing on the ceiling like ghosts. She realized then, it didn't matter how much she gave, how well she performed, how real her feelings had become. To everyone else, including him, she was just a hired illusion. The next morning, Nathaniel handed her an envelope with her monthly payment. No eye contact, no small talk. Emily stared at the envelope. Her hands trembled. She had sold her time, her presence, even her emotions. And in return, she was invisible. For the first time, she wondered, was surviving worth becoming someone she no longer recognized? Emily stopped smiling. At first, it was subtle, a slower rise of her lips, a longer pause before she answered a question. But soon, the silence between her and Nathaniel grew louder than any conversation they had ever shared. She no longer cared about the dresses. She no longer looked out over the city skyline with awe. The penthouse, once mesmerizing, now felt like a gilded cage. Nathaniel didn't notice, or maybe he chose not to. His world moved with precision, early meetings, constant phone calls, strict routines. Emily became another part of that rhythm, predictable, quiet, functional. But inside, she was unraveling. Maggie's health had started to decline again. Emily called every night, her voice cheerful for her grandmother's sake, but the worry twisted inside her like a knot. There were nights she begged Nathaniel for a few days off to visit, but he always had a reason to keep her close. "There's a dinner Tuesday," he'd say, "an interview Thursday. I need you here." She nodded, every time, but it chipped away at her. The final crack came on a Wednesday morning. Maggie's nurse called while Emily was putting on her earrings for a networking breakfast. Her grandmother had collapsed. They were rushing her to the hospital. Emily didn't even take off the heels. She stormed into Nathaniel's office, her voice shaking. "My grandmother's in the ER," she said. "I have to go." He didn't look up from his tablet. "Emily, we have a meeting in 40 minutes. "I don't care about the meeting." Nathaniel finally met her eyes. His expression was unreadable. "You signed a contract." The words echoed like a slap. Emily left without another word. She took a cab to the hospital, still dressed in a silk blouse and pearl earrings that didn't belong to her. Maggie never woke up. She had suffered a massive stroke. By the time Emily arrived, the machines were already doing all the work. She held her grandmother's hand and whispered apologies between tears. "I should have been here. I should have come sooner," she repeated like a prayer. That night, Emily sat alone in the hospital lobby until the lights dimmed. She didn't go back to the penthouse. She didn't answer Nathaniel's texts. She didn't even cry anymore. She was too hollow for that. A week passed, then two. She returned to the penthouse one last time while Nathaniel was away on a business trip. The place was spotless, untouched, like her absence hadn't mattered. Her dresses still hung in the closet. Her name was still on the guest list for next week's charity event. But she was done pretending. She packed a single bag, left the keys on the marble counter. No note, no goodbye. Emily moved in with her cousin Rachel, a schoolteacher in a quiet town upstate. Rachel welcomed her with open arms and a couch to sleep on. It wasn't much, but it was real. For weeks, Emily barely spoke. She walked through each day numb, haunted by guilt, by anger, by grief. She had given everything to a life that never truly saw her, and lost the one person who had. One night, curled on the couch, she whispered to Rachel, "I feel like I don't exist." Rachel touched her hand gently. "Then maybe it's time to find out who you really are. Not for anyone else, just for you." Those words didn't fix everything, but they stayed, and in the stillness that followed, something inside Emily began to stir. Not hope, not yet, but something deeper. The quiet decision to rebuild. If any part of this story feels familiar, take a moment. Like the video if it moved you, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here. You're not alone, and sometimes just knowing that can change everything. Let's keep this conversation real, raw, and full of heart. It started with a box of letters. Rachel had found them in Emily's suitcase while organizing the closet. Old, worn envelopes tied together with a piece of blue ribbon. They were from Maggie, notes she had written for Emily throughout her childhood, birthday messages, encouragements for school exams, random memories of the two of them baking cookies on rainy afternoons. One night, unable to sleep, Emily opened one at random. "If life ever makes you feel invisible, remember this: I see you. I always have." Emily stared at the words until her eyes blurred with tears. For weeks she had felt like a ghost, wandering, weightless, unseen. But Maggie had seen her, always. The next morning she took a long walk through the quiet streets of Rachel's neighborhood. Children played in yards, neighbors waved from porches, no luxury cars, no designer clothes, just people, living. She passed a community center with a hand-painted sign, "Free mental health support. Volunteers, welcome." Something pulled at her. She walked in expecting nothing. A woman greeted her warmly, offered coffee, and asked if she was there for help or to help. Emily hesitated, then said, "Maybe both." Over the following weeks, Emily returned again and again. At first, she just listened to single mothers, veterans, people struggling with anxiety and grief. She saw herself in their eyes. Not the Emily from the penthouse, but the one who once sat by her grandmother's bed, dreaming of studying psychology. She began volunteering, just organizing papers, setting up chairs, but it gave her purpose, something solid to hold on to, something that didn't require pretending. At night, she studied quietly in the corner of Rachel's living room. She applied to an online program in psychology, using the last of the money she hadn't spent. For the first time, she wasn't chasing someone else's idea of success. She was choosing herself. Then came the morning sickness. It hit without warning, first in the early hours, then during a workshop she was helping run. Rachel guessed before Emily said a word. Emily sat at the kitchen table, holding a positive pregnancy test, her hands trembling. "He's Nathaniel's," she said quietly. Rachel's expression didn't change. She simply nodded. "What are you going to do?" Emily looked down at the test. For the first time in a long time, her voice didn't shake. "I'm going to love him, and I'm going to raise him to know that he was never a contract. He was a choice." That night, she wrote in her journal for the first time in years, "I don't know what the future looks like, but I'm not lost anymore. I'm becoming." Emily's world no longer revolved around penthouses and contracts. It revolved around morning feedings, sleepless nights, and the quiet rhythm of learning how to be a mother. Jacob was born in the early spring, on a rainy Wednesday morning. Emily held him close against her chest and cried harder than she ever had before. Tears that carried grief, relief, and something else she hadn't felt in a long time, meaning. She named him Jacob Carter, choosing not to include Whitmore on the birth certificate. Not out of spite, but because this little boy, with his bright, curious eyes, didn't belong to that world. He belonged to hers. Rachel helped in every way she could, watching Jacob while Emily attended online classes, cooking meals, reminding her to breathe. And slowly, life began to take shape. Emily worked part-time at a local bookstore, a quiet place that welcomed her with no judgment and let her bring Jacob on slow afternoons. Customers would smile at the baby in the sling against her chest, and for the first time, she felt visible for something true. Not as a role she was playing, but as who she was. In the evenings, after Jacob fell asleep, she studied. Late nights were hard, especially when her eyes ached from exhaustion and doubt crept in like an old enemy. But every time she thought about quitting, she remembered Maggie's letters and Jacob's heartbeat. She no longer needed validation from the outside. Her sense of worth wasn't tied to dresses or dinner parties, or how well she performed in someone else's narrative. It was in the little things. Jacob's smile when she entered the room, the feeling of acing a quiz, the handwritten note a bookstore customer left saying, "Thank you for the kindness." One afternoon, while reorganizing the bookshelf at work, Emily overheard a woman crying softly in the corner, a mother who had just lost her job and didn't know how to feed her children. Emily sat beside her, offering nothing but presence and a quiet, "I've been there." That moment stayed with her. She realized healing didn't come from being saved, it came from being seen, and she wanted to spend the rest of her life helping others feel that. Emily wasn't wealthy, she wasn't powerful, but she had something she never had before, a clear sense of who she was. And that, more than anything, was her beginning. The years passed quietly, but not without struggle. Emily balanced motherhood, work, and her psychology degree, with the grace of someone who had learned to carry weight in silence. There were nights Jacob wouldn't sleep, nights when the bills felt heavier than hope, and days when she questioned everything. But even in her lowest moments, she never considered going back. Not to the penthouse, not to the contract, not to the girl who once begged for someone to see her. Still, the past had a way of lingering. One evening, as she scrolled through the news on her phone after putting Jacob to bed, a familiar name appeared. Nathaniel Whitmore. Investment empire under investigation. She froze. The article detailed a financial scandal, lawsuits, resignations. Nathaniel, once untouchable, was falling from the world he built. Emily stared at his photo. His face was the same, sharp jaw, cold eyes, but something in him looked hollow, as if the man who once controlled everything had finally lost control. She put the phone down, her heart pounding, not from pity, but from something deeper, conflict, closure, and an ache she couldn't name. Rachel found her still at the kitchen table an hour later. "You're thinking of seeing him," she said. "I don't know why," Emily admitted. "It's been years. He doesn't even know Jacob exists." Rachel sat beside her. "Then maybe it's time he does." Emily didn't sleep that night. She replayed everything, the contract, the silence, the goodbye, with no words. But she also remembered the small moments, the way Nathaniel once listened to her hum and said nothing, or how his hand would tremble slightly when he thought no one noticed. She wasn't going back for revenge or closure. She wasn't going back to open old wounds. She was going back because Jacob deserved to know the truth, and because she was no longer the woman who left in silence. She had found her voice. A week later, Emily dressed simply, the way she always did now. Clean jeans, soft sweater, hair pulled back. Jacob wore his favorite sneakers and carried a drawing he made, a family holding hands under a sun with a big yellow smile. They boarded a train to the city. Jacob laughed the entire ride, unaware of the storm beneath his mother's calm. When the elevator door opened to Nathaniel's penthouse, Emily's heart pounded. But she didn't hesitate. She wasn't here to beg. She wasn't here to accuse. She was here to tell the truth, and to see what remained on the other side of it. Nathaniel opened the door slowly, as if expecting a ghost. And in some way, he was. Emily stood in the hallway, her expression calm but unreadable. Jacob hid behind her legs, peeking up with wide, curious eyes. For a moment, Nathaniel didn't speak. His mind raced to catch up with the image in front of him. This woman he hadn't seen in years, and the boy who looked far too much like himself to be coincidence. "Emily," he said quietly, almost disbelieving. "Hi, Nate." He stepped aside without a word. The penthouse looked the same, sleek, minimalist, cold. Emily walked in slowly, Jacob clinging to her hand. Nathaniel's eyes shifted to the child. "Who is he?" She crouched beside Jacob. "This is Jacob," she said softly, then looked up. "He's your son." Silence filled the space like fog. Nathaniel stared at the boy, eyes locked on the same shade of brown he saw in the mirror every morning. "I didn't come for money," Emily added, breaking the tension. "I don't want anything from you. I just thought you should know the truth, and he deserves to know where he came from." Nathaniel ran a hand over his face, his composure cracking. "Why now?" Emily's voice was steady. "Because I'm not afraid of you anymore." That hit harder than anything else. Nathaniel sat on the edge of a leather armchair, visibly shaken. I didn't know. I didn't think you'd ever come back. You never asked why I left. I assumed you were done playing your part." Emily looked at him with a sadness that didn't need words. "I was never acting. Not the way you thought." Nathaniel's eyes dropped to Jacob again. The boy was now sitting on the floor, quietly drawing on the back of an envelope from the coffee table. His small fingers gripped the pen just like Nathaniel did when deep in thought. He cleared his throat. "Can I talk to him?" Emily nodded. "He's shy, but he's kind. And smart." Nathaniel knelt beside his son. "Hi, Jacob." The boy looked up. "Hi. What are you drawing?" "A house," he said. "It has 3 people. One is me, one is Mommy, and I guess maybe that one can be you." Nathaniel's breath caught. He blinked hard. "I'd like that." Emily watched from the couch, her heart caught between fear and something gentler. She hadn't known what to expect coming here. But this softness in a man she had only known as stone, it surprised her. As the hours passed, they talked. About the years lost, about Maggie, about Jacob's first steps and his favorite books. Nathaniel admitted he'd seen the articles. He had read about people whispering behind his back, about investors turning cold. He was losing more than his company. He was losing the armor that had protected him his whole life. "I didn't know how to be close to anyone," he confessed. "I thought control was safety." Emily looked him in the eyes. "And now? Now I see what I missed." He reached into a drawer and pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper. "I never told anyone this," he said. "But the day after you left, I started writing a letter. I never finished it." He handed it to her. Emily unfolded it slowly. It was short. Scattered words. "I'm sorry. I don't know how to feel. I miss you. I miss your presence. I didn't think it would matter this much." She folded it back, hands trembling. "You mattered," he said softly. "I just didn't know how to say it then." Emily felt something shift. Not forgiveness, at least not yet, but possibility. "I don't know what this means," she said honestly, "but I'm not here to rewrite the past." He nodded. "Maybe we can write something new." Jacob ran up to them holding his picture. "Look, we're all in it now." Emily smiled. And for the first time in years, so did Nathaniel, not out of performance, but out of something real. Emily stood at the window of her small apartment weeks later, watching Jacob chase bubbles in the backyard, while Nathaniel sat cross-legged on the grass, letting the boy cover his suit pants in soap and laughter. It still felt surreal, how far life had come from cold penthouses and lonely silences. But this wasn't about reconciliation alone. It was about growth. It was about truth. She often thought about the contract, how it reduced something as complex as human connection into bullet points and signatures. Back then, she believed love could be earned by being useful, by performing well enough. Now she understood something far deeper. Love isn't earned, it's offered, it's chosen over and over again. Nathaniel had changed. Not overnight, not in some grand romantic way, but slowly. He listened now. He showed up. He learned to sit with discomfort instead of hiding behind control. And Emily had changed too. She no longer looked for permission to be worthy. She no longer measured her value through someone else's eyes. They weren't a perfect family, but they were real. What began as a transaction had forced both of them to confront who they truly were and who they wanted to become. And that was the legacy Emily hoped Jacob would inherit, that his story began with truth, but would always be guided by choice. 2 years later, Emily sat in a small circle of folding chairs inside the very community center where she had once found refuge. But this time, she wasn't seeking help. She was leading a group. Around her sat women of all ages. Some were escaping manipulation, others mourning identities lost in relationships that silenced them. Emily listened, nodded, and when the moment was right, she spoke, not as an expert, but as someone who had lived it. "I used to believe that if I was quiet enough, small enough, agreeable enough, someone would finally choose me," she said gently. "But the truth is, I had to choose myself first." After the session, she stayed behind to organize chairs. Jacob ran around the empty room, his backpack bouncing with every step. Nathaniel arrived minutes later to pick him up, pausing at the doorway, watching Emily with quiet admiration. Their relationship wasn't defined by titles anymore. They co-parented, they supported each other, they respected the boundaries Emily had learned to protect. Sometimes they had dinner as a family, sometimes they didn't, but it was always honest, always real. Emily had graduated with her degree in psychology and now worked part-time counseling young women in crisis. Her voice had found purpose, and it was louder than it had ever been. She often thought of Maggie, hoping she would be proud, not just of the accomplishments, but of the strength it took to walk away, to return, and to heal without losing herself. Jacob was thriving. He knew he was loved, he knew where he came from, but most importantly, he knew who his mother was, not someone who had been saved, but someone who had saved herself. And that was the most powerful legacy of all. Have you ever made a choice that changed everything? Emily's story began with a contract, but what truly defined her journey was the courage to walk away from who she was and step into who she was meant to become. She wasn't saved by love. She was saved by truth, by self-worth, by the decision to no longer accept less than she deserved. And maybe you felt like her, overlooked, underestimated, surviving instead of living. Maybe you've been in a place where silence felt safer than speaking your truth. But remember this, healing doesn't come all at once. It comes in steps, in choices, in standing up for yourself even when your voice shakes. So now, we want to hear from you. What part of Emily's journey spoke to you the most? Have you ever faced a moment where choosing yourself felt like the hardest and most important thing you could do? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's create a space where real stories, real pain, and real transformation can be seen. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because every choice has a weight, and sometimes choosing yourself is the heaviest of all.